This review is going to be really special because I have the author of the Iconoclasts series, Aching God, Sin Eater, Idols Fall, and I just have to say I absolutely loved it. This is going to be a gush review.
Oh, I'll let you go ahead and do that.
I'm doing this review with Steve, talks about books and stuff. He's a really, really cool booktuber. I have so many questions for Mike. So first of all, how are you doing? What are your 2022 goals?
Writing another novel.
Oh,
Things are going slow. I'm a couple chapters into the new book. So.
Nice.
Nice.
I'm just going to get right into it. How much outlining do you do when you're writing?
It's varied from book to book. Aching God, I had an outline for each chapter. Sin Eater, there was less outlining. There were more kind of broad strokes. Idols Fall, I mean, I had ideas, general ideas about what was happening during the course of the book, but I didn't know the direction that everything necessarily went. So some of it was just discovery writing.
You seem to have a very, very nice balance. You know how people come up and say the book was heavily plot based or heavily character based? The balance in that was really, really good. Mike, the pacing was absolutely beautiful. This has to be one of my favorite trilogies that I've read in a long time. You know, I need some time because I'm still so hyped up because I have a lot of recency bias.
Thank you. This is my first trilogy. And this was the first closer I wrote for a trilogy, and I had a lot of anxiety about sticking the landing because a lot of people are very critical of third books and what ends up happening, whether it's they don't meet expectations or it seems like is not as interested in the characters, whatever the case may be. So I was really wanting this to end with a bang.
Steve, what are your general thoughts on the book?
The trilogy as a whole, I loved it. And what's funny is that I usually don't like quest books. I started wondering, why do I enjoy this series? And I think it's there's like a lot of build-up, and it keeps the quest interesting. It's not just, we're going to go on a quest, and that's your primary focus. When they're on the quest, it's a bigger picture throughout the whole trilogy. I really loved it. I loved Aching God. It's one of my favorite fantasy books, and I love the series as a whole. So it's been one of my favorite things that I've done here on YouTube.
Thank you. I'm really glad to hear that.
First of all, I'd like to say the leap from Sin Eater to Idols Fall in terms of the improvement in your writing is humongous. And something I enjoyed a lot was your prose. Your prose did a lot to maintain that epic, dark tone throughout the book, and it was very, very consistent. When you are editing your manuscript, are you adding or are you taking out?
What I'll do first is go over and try to cut out a few words that are bad habit words, clean the manuscript that way. The word suddenly keeps popping up. Everything's happening suddenly. I needed to dig those out. Just looking at cleaning up prose a little bit. For Idols Fall, I had a writer who I respect a great deal give me his feedback. Dorian Hart, the author of Heroes of Spira. Phil Tucker, I spoke with quite a bit. Dorian's suggestion is that we need these chapters that you've cut out. Because I decided I wasn't going to write a couple of chapters. Cut away the fat. My end document was about 30,000 words longer than the original, than the first draft manuscript was. I'm glad for that because that was a blast to write.
Another reason to love self-public.
I know. There are so many advantages of being a self-published author that I feel like people don't often acknowledge. When at the end of the book, you look at it and you can feel real ownership for it, which is very important when you are writing from your heart.
A traditional fantasy author contacted me and said, "Hey,
I really like this. Would you like to talk to my agent to see if you want to get a trad deal?"
I said, "Sure," and was going to speak with his agent. As soon as the agent found out that I'd already contracted the audio rights for the series to Podium, he was no longer interested in talking to me. But what he said is,
when you finish this series, come back to me and I'll talk with you when you start on your next series. For instance, I would have cut out all the stuff that happened on the ship.
And when he said that, I thought, I really like what happened on the ship. I'm not someone who's so precious about his writing that
every single word is one of my children and it must be perfectly.
I mean, I'm very open to feedback, and I've had other writers give me some feedback that I've taken and chopped stuff out and rewritten things. But sometimes I hear something like that, or like what I heard when I spoke with an editor at one of the big fives, and I thought, you know what, I like the independence more, and I might make a decision that makes this book less marketable, maybe, but it's going to be more my book, and it's my vision.
Another thing that I really love about it is that the deaths in book 2 that I did not see coming at all. You just go for it and you kill off characters that people get attached to, because I was attached to Auric.
I was too.
I love those chances. And as an author, it must be nerve-wracking a little bit, because do you worry about those responses from readers that I really love that character and you killed him off?
I think the in Sin Eater, the Oric's death at the end, I was real scared about doing that.
Yeah.
And how are people going to respond? Because a lot of people really responded to Oric as a non-traditional POV character, where here's an older guy, wanting him to kind of see this through to the end. But the story arc that I had, he had to die, because this was ultimately Agnes's mission to complete, and he needed to atone for his sin. I mean, there's kind of a therapy session between Oric and the Sin Eater. It's a pretty brutal therapy session, but where he kind of gets at, your sin was despair and abandonment, and that's what you need to atone for that. And that's what Oric ends up doing, is giving his daughter a chance to live her full life, even though he leaves her obviously with a very onerous task that she has to complete. Oric, he's my first protagonist, and in a lot of ways kind of my idealized self, my image of the good guy who's just doing his best. He wants to be a good man, but he has his weaknesses. And I really came to, really love this character. So it was hard for me to do that. Bellic didn't die at the end of Aching God, the first draft. Sarah was the one who died.
Oh, wow.
And
that's very interesting.
Because I thought Sarah had become kind of this surrogate daughter for him in Aching God. So I thought that's going to have the most impact. But then I realized, no, I think people are going to respond to Bellic more, and Bellic needs to die. So yeah, I worry about how people are going to respond to that. They'll say,
well, this felt contrived, or it feels,
some people will complain
oh, you're just doing it for effect.
It's a hard thing to do, to kill your darlings.
I agree with you. Killing Oric was such a risky decision. It had me a bit concerned after Sin Eater, but you did such a brilliant work with Agnes in the next book. What is your process? Do you take inspiration from people that you know? Do you have some kind of formula into making a character as colorful as you make them?
Remember my day job, which is as a psychotherapist. I get into a very intimate headspace with a lot of people, which can be very, very different from mine. I think that's probably part of it. I think about people's motivations, right? I think about how their histories have affected who they are. So a lot of it is, how do I make this person three-dimensional? You think about a throwaway character, like the guy that they bump into when they get to Calamander. I had thoughts about what this guy did. He was a bureaucrat for the Duchy government, and kind of some background about him. But none of it came out. And sometimes I'm planting a seed that's gonna bloom. Alonda started off as a one-off. I didn't expect her to be in more than a chapter or two, and she ended up. She's a major POV character in the third book, and the Queen. Having a window on people's inner experience and being interested in people's motivations and the history and the baggage they carry. That's how I do it.
Speaking of Ilanda, I love what you do with her character. She became such a ruthless queen. How do you come up with these Zhao names? Garashah, Jadashela, Timulus, Ushul, Vesham. It sounds so epic. How do you come up with these names?
I don't know. The idea of the Zhao language is I wanted it to feel alien, but also in a way very kind of lyrical. I don't know. I wish I could think of the moment that I came up with Zadashela, because that's probably my favorite. I think it's one of my superpowers. By the way, I'm interested to hear what you guys thought of the little time travel.
I did not see that. That was great. I love that. And I love the bloodletting scene in the tavern and everything. It's something that you do really well as you build that anticipation. But these heart-wrenching scenes are drawn out, and not in a bad way. This isn't really going to happen. Something's going to come and someone's going to save Kulib, and he's going to be okay. And then it happens. Shit.
Steve, what do you think about how the book ended?
I'm hoping we'll get more in this world.
Yes, I am desperately hoping we get more in this world.
The book I'm working on right now takes place about 200 years in the future. How would you guys feel about me reading about 2,000 words of the opening chapter of this?
I can say no to that.
There's a reason Simon Vance does the audiobooks for me. So cut me some slack. But the name of this chapter is West of Popdala.
Wow, how cool is this? This is awesome.
I reckoned it had been hanging there for at least 3 days, judging by the state it was in. The crows had made short work of the eyes and nibbled at lips and cheeks, but the clenched jaw told me that it still had a tongue, and that's all that mattered to me. I cut the rope tied round the tree with my hunting knife and let the body drop to the ground. It landed with an unceremonious wet sound. The broad leaves of the hanging tree had apparently sheltered flesh from sun so that it still held some juice despite the heat of late summer. I sat down beside it, legs crossed, and reached for my death bag. Rummaging around, I sought what I needed. First, my charm, the silver cruciform sword of St. Agnes, hung on a delicate chain. I put that round my neck. Second, the finger bone of a virgin. Well, finger bone of an alleged virgin. Such propositions being dicey in the best of times, which these weren't. Third, a vial of baby spittle, duly blessed. The spittle, that is. Baby can't itself have been baptized in the faith. Good luck finding one of them on the frontier, where folks are more likely than not deeply devout, if not outright fanatics. I kissed the charm and drew in a deep breath, preparing myself. This sort of work was never pleasant. The corpse's jaws I pried apart with my knife, eliciting a vile, creaking protest of leathery muscle. Then I shoved the finger bone past the tongue and as far down the throat as I could manage. Next, a whispered antikatsu incantation into a dusty ear, nicks and pieces torn from it over the past few days by hungry black beaks. I blew a breath into the mouth, suppressing my gorge as I came into contact with the flaking, desiccated lips of the corpse. A cold sickness in the pit of my stomach signaled that the spirit was creeping up from below and climbing back into the body. After a long moment, the corpse finally shuddered. It startled me, if I'm going to be honest with you, even though I knew it would happen. "I can't see," was the first thing the dead man said. "Crows have been at your eyes, friend," I answered. He sighed, chest rising and falling, trying to fill up dead lungs that had no living use for the air. He clucked his tongue and said, "Departed, then. Don't remember dying." "Someone was unhappy with you," I offered. "They hanged you from a tree." The corpse frowned and let out a long breath that stunk like an untended battlefield. "Hatches, then," he said. "Maybe Oliver and that new dolly of his, the one with the tits." "Where am I? Doge's?" "Long way from Doge's, at least 15 miles west of Popdala, in fact. No more than 4 days' ride east of the Red Wastes." "Huh, not bounty hunters, then," he mused, voice emotionless and thin. 500 on my head last time I checked. Bounty hunter wouldn't string up their payday and leave it swinging. Hey, bring me into that fat-ass sheriff in Popdala and we'll split the coin for the reward." He tried to laugh then, but it came out more like a barking cough. I had me a wry one. "Thanks for the offer, friend, but I'll respectfully decline." "Won't stoop to claiming a bounty?" he asked with a bitter sneer, like he was offended. "Not that. Headed west is all." Bellew wept. "What on earth for? Only dogs, diggers, and witches wander out that way, other than a few foolhardy sodbusters speaking in tongues and asking for the trouble they find." I watched the realization dawn on his dead features. "You're a dirt witch." It was spoken with certainty and scorn. "Been called worse," I said, and I took no offense at the slur. "I can't see you. You sound white. Stole then as a boy? By the Tachi? The Gels?" "No one stole me, friend, but I spent a fair spell with the Tachi. Had a shorter visit with the Docats. Gave me a lot of medicine, they did, and a lot of wisdom." "Wisdom? I'd spit if I could," said the corpse. "Woke up from the grave by a stinking Tachi dirt witch. What a turn of fate. What do you want with me anyway?" "Need to ask you a few questions, if it ain't too much trouble." "Oh, leave me be." "Leave you be? What else would you be doing out here?" "Eternal rest and all. What else? Why should I help you waking me up like this? What's in it for me?" The dead, still looking for an angle. "Well, I'll release you. Let you get back to that long nap of yours. Unless you'd rather wait here till someone else wanders along, another shaman, or maybe someone who might do you the courtesy of dicing you up into bits tiny enough so that your soul don't have nothing to cling to and cut you loose from the waking world." His scowl wasn't pretty. "You'd do that to me? Let me lie here in this rotten carcass stuck between worlds?" Maybe I would have. I was beginning to feel a bit ornery and plenty impatient. "Don't want to. Just need some answers is all." What could I know that you need? I don't even know who strung me up. The dead know things, friend. Sometimes they don't know what they know till you ask them. So I'm going to ask you some questions and see if you could know, have some knowledge that I require. The corpse's grimace was skeptical, but what he asked next surprised me. Are they things I want to know I know? An ace of a question, and one people don't ask themselves often enough. Do I really want to know these things? Am I better off in my ignorance? I told him a lie. Well, fair to say I told him something I didn't know to be true for certain, something I just pulled from the air to put him at ease. You'll forget it all as soon as I release you and let you head on out past the final veil. He gave me a nod and said no more, ragged, empty eye sockets staring back at me. Taking that as affirmation, I gathered some of the orange-tinged dirt from the ground in my left hand and let a few drops of the blessed baby spittle drip from the bottle. I mixed them together until I had a muddy paste and made the mark of the cruciform blade on the corpse's forehead, whispering the necessary words. I took St. Agnes from around my neck and pressed the metal onto the mark. And then I asked my first question. What did they call you? Tom Bench, Leda Hockett, by way of Champlain. Did a man pass by here, Tom? Pale, one-eyed fellow, wavy blonde hair, wearing a blue shirt, roses tooled on a leather belt. After a moment, the corpse spoke. Yeah. How long ago? Half a day, maybe a bit more. Armed, single pistol in a holster, the other an empty. An old cavalry sword, drawn and held casual in his right hand, dragging the point through the dirt as he walked. There was a demon riding him, Tom. What was its name? A pause. Then, Apterfuge. Apterfuge. I'd never heard the name. That gave me reason to hope. A lesser spirit of the pit, then? Oh, no, said the corpse of Tom Bench, a wicked rictus grin spreading across his chapped and nicked face. A soldier of the furnace, hungry and trailing fire. You can still smell the cinders on the wind if you snip real deep. My heart skipped a beat, and the sick knot in my stomach did a little jig. It was worse than I thought. So much worse. Not sure if this one is a trilogy or if I'm going to be able to tell this story in one or two books. So we'll see.
What were some of the rules that you intentionally decided to go another way because you wanted to write what you wanted to write?
I don't think enough about my writing process to really comment intelligently on that. It just kind of happens. I remember someone early on telling me, oh, dude, you never start a story with a dream. That's a huge cliche. And of course, that's how Aching God starts, is a nightmare, which you know very quickly. Before the paragraph's out, you know it's a nightmare. I think because I've been such a voracious reader, I've kind of, maybe some of this stuff, I know it on an intuitive level. But in terms of breaking rules, I think what I ended up doing a lot of times when people have pointed out rules that I've broken that might be affecting the quality of the story, I've listened. When I started writing for Paizo, for the RPG stuff for Pathfinder, they really started cracking the whip on my passive voice, which happened a lot and still does. And so that's probably one of the things that, a rule they talk about staying away from, because just as people are less engaged with that. A lot of this stuff I do intuitively, not a writer's writer. You want to talk to Phil Tucker or AC Cobble or Tim Whitecastle or Evan Winter. They're writers as far as I'm concerned. But I love to hear them talk about it because it makes me think about my own process. But then when it gets down to it, I just sit down and do what I do. And
just naturally.
I'm going to call it natural or just happy accidents happening.
Steve, what was a moment where you got your heart beating and you just got excited?
Oh, the bloodletting scene.
The bloodletting scene, you mentioned that.
That, and of course the climax was, wow. That had my heart beating pretty good. But there's so many great moments, and Epic is right, Mike, that you always name off. You're very humble and very supportive, so that's great.
For me, the first chapter, when she was touched by fire. You've written Aching God, and then you've written Sin Eater, and then you start the book like that. People lighting themselves on fire and just causing chaos. That first chapter just got me right back into it. Immediately, I was like, oh shit. And then, of course, like throughout the book, we see the consequences of that, like the girl that was touched by fire.
I wrote that first chapter and didn't expect her to come back.
Oh,
So
you didn't expect her to come back.
No, I thought,
Wow.
again, I thought that she was kind of introducing this is chaos and world is going to start to fall apart. My mind kept going back to her. Then, of course, she ends up on the cover.
Of course, that's her on the cover.
Mhm. I will never disbelieve writers who talk about what happens in Discovery, because it is a very cool thing when characters seem to have a life of their own and come back even after you set them on fire.
As far as heart, you know, get scenes that get your heart pumping, especially in Aching God, the nightmares are so great. It was almost like it turned into a horror book for, you know, during those scenes. And I hope you decide to write a horror book one day, because you have a real talent for those scenes and just terrifying.
So terrifying.
So terrifying.
So terrifying. When I was reading it, my analytic mind just shut off. I was just reading it completely right-brained.
Cool. Good. I think that's one of the things that I have a lot of trouble now with, is shutting off my writer brain when I'm reading. And it's something that I didn't have a problem with before I wrote the novels. And I think the prose does improve over the course of the 3 books. I mean, one thing we could call this trilogy is Mike learns to write novel. He learns to write a novel, we can call it series. Aching God's first draft took 10 weeks. Sin Eater took 10 months. Idle's Fall took 18 months. Hopefully this next one isn't going to take 24 months.
Well, no pressure, but we're looking forward to it.
I'm actually very excited for it. And do you know what you're going to call it yet?
If it ends up being a series, it'll be called Novo Mundi. If the first book is tentatively titled West of the World.
Are you going to kill off your main character in this one as well? I'm just joking.
Sure. Honestly, not sure.
Of course, don't tell us. I think this would actually make such a good adaptation if it's done right.
I won't argue with you on that. I would love to see that happen.
Who would you want to play your characters?
I actually have thought about this, and I'm embarrassed to say. The character of Auric was born originally when I watched the Masterpiece Theater adaptation of Wolf Hall, in which Mark Rylance plays Thomas Cromwell. I could kind of see a younger Firuza Balk playing, I'm forgetting the names of my own characters now, Del, the sorcerer in the first book.
She's from The Craft, right? Back in the 90s?
Yeah. Dakota Fanning, or Elle Fanning for Syrah, with Tilda Swinton, by the way, is Lumari. I can't think of who I want to play Agnes. You guys have ideas?
The actress from The Expanse, I forget the character she plays.
She's the Australian actress.
Yes, yeah.
Actually, maybe a bit younger. I love the actress who plays Kamina Drummer. Maybe I just love because I love that character so much.
Yeah, that would be so cool. An adaptation. Do not give it to Amazon Prime, please. Netflix.
All right, I'll hold out for Netflix.
When Amazon Prime comes, tell them no.
They tell them, nah.
Sorry. After what you did to Wheel of Time, they tell they didn't care how much the money truck that you're backing up to my house has. I'm not interested.
Yes.
Take that Brinks truck and get out of here.
You and your Brinks truck and get the hell out of here.
Yeah, I want the guys who did The Expanse, except that they're also the guys who wrote The Expanse.
That's probably why it's good.
I'm sure that has something to do with it. And probably had something to do, too, with the fact that when George R.R. Martin was more involved with Game of Thrones, it was a more vital show with actual consistency in the characters. And
when you were writing Sin Eater and when you're writing Idle's Fall, did you see anything in any of the previous books you kind of regretted doing?
Not really, because I had a good sense of I knew where this series ended. And before I finished writing Aching God, I knew how Idle's Fall generally ended, what the truth was about these gods and how this would all pan out. The thing that jumps out at me, that it's embarrassing to say, there's an item, a magical coin that Auric gets from the Bishop of Timolis in Ironwound that is like a little lie detector thing. And I never did another damn thing with it. It's not another reference to it in the entire series. I'm rereading and I'm like, oh shit. So one thing is, I wish I could take the damn coin out of there, because it ended up not being anything. Totally forgot about it.
Someone that reads it now would just think, oh, that was just something that you used at the time because it was convenient.
Yeah, Mike forgot about that part of the story.
Maybe it'll make a comeback in the new book.
Yeah, or maybe if I had that agent, he would have rated that shit out, so I wouldn't have egg on my face.